Every single chapter that he's in, I end up thinking that Lekka is gonna have more significance in the long run. I noticed that the design that was on his coat and before he became dragonized had this it had this design that was similar to that of the demon seed from with Natsu, and I wonder what's going on with that. Maybe it's just a cool design and it's just a similarity, but as it were, I thought this chapter was a really cool follow up on the previous one. The previous one, like if we had something else besides the narration, I don't think people would have had the same complaints. But it was like the portions of combat in the last chapter felt like it was supposed to be leaned more in the fairy tale side, and I think it was done in very small subtle things. Like I mentioned, you have Lekka using a named attack, and he's got like what fire make heat rain, and Gray is able to block it without using any of his Devil Slayer buffs at all. He just blocks it with just his basic ice make, and with that, it's like, okay, it shows that even with this Dragon Eyes buff, it gives Gray a lot of really strong, just general showings of Gray's capability if he's able to ward off this guy's attack. Whereas like in this chapter, Gray goes for an attack, but it's not a named attack. It's not like a technique. He just does like a generic ice blast right at him. Just does a usage of his element to offensively just go at him. And Lekka ends up blocking with a fire make shield. And an interesting thing is, in the last chapter when he uses his heat rain, it's, I would assume, in the shape of just regular, or like it's just regular looking fire. There's nothing about it that looks anything crazy in effect. And then in this chapter, when he uses his shield, it has a different design. It doesn't look like it's just a flames in the shape of a shield. It looks like there is like this design of like, I don't really know what it would be other than like literally a physical shield that's there, and what like maybe it produces flames on the opposing side. But after he used his shield, and again, this is the fact that like right after this you see this, he's using his flames more on just directly on his hands, and they have this like speckled like grainy effects drawn into them, and like this almost ominous darker shading. And it makes me wonder, like, because we know that Natsu can't eat his fire like directly. We don't know, like, he's not like he had a long time to like, oh yeah, let me take some time to analyze this guy's flame and adapt to it. No, like he just was very abrupt. So we know that there should be still a reveal on that, because otherwise, why keep drawing it with this specific detail if you weren't gonna have a reveal on it with this character? I kind of like the idea that, similar to like, if you had Ignia and he's making his own guild, and he's like, well, what do I want to end up having in my guild? And he's like, well, what's stuff that not so successful? You have like a maker wizard. You have Lekka, who initially was a fire make wizard, and he ends up getting pushed and leading down like devil slaying. Because I think devil slaying would make sense as why Natsu couldn't directly eat it, because it would mess with his Etheria side without him really understanding directly. And that would probably give him a little bit of like, it'd give him problems in it, like messing with his powers, encountering his natural sides that he doesn't have control over with his all of his Etheria stuff. And it would make sense as to why that he doesn't just instantly figure out, like, okay, what do I need to do in order to adapt and figure this out. So I thought that just was a neat little nod again at Lekka and what's going on with him. I really want to find out more about his character and what's going on with that strange flame. Is it going to be more of like tied to his backstory? Is it going to being a more important, larger scale in the plot? I really like this idea that like Ignia's whole plan and making the guild, because these guys are all fire dragons. Natsu should retain their whole fire, because if we look back at what we know of for Natsu, he doesn't retain every fire that he eats ever when he, goes about using Dragon Force, but he does seemingly keep the fire from dragons he's eaten. So if all of these technically for the members of Fire and Flames are types of fire dragons, will Natsu retain any flame that he eats from them and just collectively keep, piling on? because with we don't know exactly what there's special traits for the other ones, but we know Lekka has obviously some form of unknown variable when it comes to his fire. The Signario sisters are using alchemy, so they probably have something weird up their sleeve that we don't know about. And then Raj has the whole illusion flames. I don't really know what benefits that would be for Natsu for dragon illusion fire. I don't know. And then Wed is as well as an odd one because Wed is an artificial dragon while not being a new type of anything seemingly. Like obviously he's got his great sword, but I mean I don't really know what type. I mean is it what his extreme fire, is that going to be like a type of fire that does something bonus extra that adds on to Natsu's whole mass setup of flames. But I think it would make sense. I mean, if the whole setup is supposed to be, he's able to only maintain and retain the flames of dragons that he's eaten, then giving a guild set up for having other fire dragons only makes a lot of sense for what Igneous wants to do for his plans. So, I think with this chapter, like it's a good thing that like nobody really got pressed. The only I would say moment in the chapter that was really that surprising in terms of the back and forth of just general combat was Gray getting while he was dodging Lekka because he's paying attention to Lekka, Raj goes and sneaks up behind him and adds in for an extra attack. I was really surprised that Raj was even able to get in a decent moment because maybe if he was doing an illusion, but he didn't do an illusion. And it wasn't like Lekka that rushed in to attack him was a fake. It was, oh no, that was him. He just figured he saw a chance and went into attack. But it's like, well, if that's going to be the extent, is it really just going to be he's got his illusions? Well, I still don't think they're going to be that effective. And then just melee attacks? I don't know. I don't think Gray's going to really have much of a problem when they get really in a fight. I think it's one of those, just one of those scenarios where the enemy team went into it a little bit more ready for a team fight, whereas the Fairy Tail members looked at it more of like, oh yeah, this is where we're gonna spread out and battle. But it looks to me at least that it's going to end up kind of shifting into a fight where we're gonna see back and forth every few chapters. Maybe like every chapter we get like a little bit more of this fight, or every other chapter, and we see what other characters are doing for a little bit. Because I think it would make sense if we had, for the most part, a bunch of displays and skirmishes and whatnot to set up an actual one-on-one fight. And I guess in the Signario sisters and then Lucy Wendy 2v1 fight at a later date. But still, I really want to know obviously what's going on with Dogremag and Ferris and Bestia. But this is still a really interesting setup overall. The only thing for me is I don't think obviously Natsu versus Wed is really gonna last that long, because Wed's whole thing is against with Urza, because they are both swords swords masters trying to, well, Urza's not trying to achieve that level. It's just it's just something that kind of comes with the territory. And Wed is actively seemingly the strongest in direct swordsmanship in the world, so he only makes sense to be an opponent for Urza. I think if Wed fights Natsu and we get a direct actual fight with him, it won't be a very big serious, oh yeah, this has been a direct determination. I think it'd be one of those fights where we it's just supposed to be a display of power on both sides. But I don't know. I think that this one was going to be just showing, like I said, the last chapter had, oh yeah, characters are going to do some fight stuff. They're going to just kind of lean into what's going on. But the displays from the last chapter made the Fairy Tail members look a little bit better. Where in this chapter, the members of Fire and Flames ended up looking a little better. We had the Signario sisters go and attack Lucy and Wendy, but Lucy and Wendy immediately responded for a counterattack, and then stuff like that. Whereas here in this chapter, you have Raj getting a sneak attack on Gray. The Signario sisters just getting being able to intercept and deal with Natsu for a moment. There's a lot of stuff that just gave them a nice a nice bit of credibility for what they were just bringing to the table. But they also mentioned that there's a level. Oh, sorry. There's a level of dragon instinct that they kind of have now. That once they were dragonized, it connected their wills to a degree, and that could just be characters talking, shown stuff. They're just kind of being like, yeah, as dragons now, our friends and I we're all just more on the same page. We're on the same wavelength, but there might actually be like a degree of truth to what he says, or it could just be, he's literally just saying words. But I think after the way it was set up more as like, oh yeah, we as a team are this capable, and that makes Natsu, puts Natsu in a different mindset, and hopefully gets the other people in the guild, or in the group set as like, okay, well, this is now a guild versus guild, subset of these teams, and they need to be in more of a group fight kind of mentality. Like Wendy needs to, like, the one thing that they need to have like immediately into this fight for real is that Wendy needs to give everybody a buff. She needs to give everybody just a general speed and power buff. She needs to look at what they need to, I mean, obviously, like, give Urza, Lucy, and Gray the dragon attribute. Just get everything kind of just laid out the best they can, and then just, I don't know. I think personally, what I would do, I would take Raj out relatively quick. I mean, Raj is like, I think Raj is going to be a character kind of like in how he was in this chapter, really. As Gray was like focusing way more on Lekka, and Raj just does sneak attacks and then kind of is a almost offensive support for people on his team because nobody else is paying attention to this guy. He's like, because like he's like to what they probably would think of for Lucy, but Lucy has so many weird tricks and things that she can pull out to give her a fight that even give her the scales of a fight to tip in her favor, whereas like in a battle that normally she wouldn't have nearly as much of a chance on. But Raj just has like illusion flames, so unless he ends up pulling out a couple new abilities or skills or whatever, I don't really see him to be that much of a dangerous character in any regard. But after that point, we just had, like I said, we had a nice moment where it was just like, okay, well, now we're going to show you the bonds between the Fairy Tail Guild members, and they had their own kind of just come into the team unity. I really like to get like a full double spread next chapter where it just has all 10 of them on screen and they're just getting in a big smash. I really do wish that we had Raj swapped out for Brian here. I like Brian more personally, but Celine goes up and flies up to Alderaan just to kind of go and have conversation. I want to know exactly what's going on with him because he was apparently defeated, but then he came back. Does this mean that he has been taken over by Ferris and the Arasion Sex? Is there something more to the locker we don't know about? I don't know. But like right after Celine goes up there, there's like an explosion up near the top of the tree, and that's when we see that Gaia has defeated Hot Eye. Cobra even notices, like, oh, Richard's down, and we have this neat little moment where Gaia, he leans up and stands up on just his back feet because he has he's got like a centaur design set up, but dinosaur centaur, a big old four hooved feet, and he decides to lean up and kind of make himself taller. It was a really neat and just a character detail, and he starts talking to him about how only love can beat love, and being unable to understand each other is also part of that. And he mentions his name, love of the earth. I'm wondering if that's going to be part of each of the Arasion Sex's things. Is it's going to be a tie into their name and character, but also is going to tell us a little bit about like each of them is foreshadowing and hinting at exactly what the reveal is around him. I really want to know what his design is really going to give us information, because he has the weird thing of he has these tattoos similar to that of like Ignia and Dogramags when they're in their human form. Like, what exactly is up with that? His weird head just makes me think of Norma from Eden Zero, of the way that it's just these big cylinders like just plunged into his skull. But his attack too uses love annihilation, and we see specifically it's showing the roots that are like dug into the part of the ground, and it makes me wonder, it's like, is it a way of like similar ability to how Azuma worked, where Azuma would charge up the, they pretty much just hyper explode the magic inside of like little fruits that he makes to create explosions. You just ferment your own bomb. And because that makes you wonder, it's like, does he doing that for the Earth? Because is he supposed to be some form of contrast to Hot Eye? Because Hot Eye, because of his whole backstory, and I know his name's Richard, but I like Hot Eye. It's a cool name. With Hot Eye, the whole stuff with his brother, living in this harsh environment of like being very unable to farm. So it makes sense of him having a ability to do like mud and make the ground soft. But it's like, is this guy, his thing, he makes the ground, like, he's not making the ground harder or softer like Jura or Hot Eye. He's just using it to kind of explode, like charging it up with energy, kind of like how Azuma used his magic. But I don't know. And as well, like right after that, when a Cobra is thinking of like, oh, Richard's down, you have Blade responding to that. And I wonder exactly what the explanation is going to be for what he, like, how exactly is he able to know that? Is he just like, oh, I'm just predicting you that well that I know that that's what you're thinking about, X, Y, Z. I think it'd be really cool if with his whole setup, he's like, oh, with black slashing magic, I can cut open anything that I can perceive. So he's like, I cut open your thoughts so I can hear, I can hear your thoughts now. So your brain and your thoughts leak over into my head, or something weird like that, where it's just like some very odd very odd power that, this is the idea of like, oh, normally it's like you attack at the thought level, the layer of your cognitive brain that makes it so you produce thoughts, and I've cut that open so now it floods into my conscious so I can hear thoughts. Some really weird thing like that I think would be really neat to kind of just give this an explanation, unless he's just like, oh, I also have hearing magic. I mean, okay, I guess, I know all types of sound magic, because I think it would make sense if each of the sects is like built off of the Sace member that they're fighting. I mean, Cobra and Blade, the whole snake sword, and just design of that is very easy to figure out. But the rest of them aren't as direct. Yeah, I guess really with Angel and Damon is like, Damon has this very easy devil girl succubus vibe, so it's like her in opposition to Angel. I guess would make sense. I don't know. I don't know, but I think that the way that this shifted was really cool, because it tells me that we're going to be seeing more of the Erasion sects over the next couple chapters. And that's what why I think that the whole fight between the Fairy Tail members and the Fire and Flame members are like, it's a really good, oh yeah, as stuff's going on, we look back over there for maybe a page or so, every other chapter or whatever, to where we're just getting like some cool fight stuff, and the main cast is busy, so we're seeing stuff from a lot of other characters and what they're up to. Outside of the main cast, I mean, obviously I'd like to see what where's Jalal at, where is he heading. Cobra getting some spotlight for a while would be really cool. I would love to see that, but I'm kind of hoping we get more spotlight from the villains, and that's where we're going to be kind of having more focus on. The Ferris and Bestia fight, I am so excited for that. I don't expect it to be like I don't need to have like 3 or 4 chapters long of a battle. I'll be perfectly happy with like a chapter and a half, 2 chapters. I just hope it's not like, if it's one of those fights where it's off-screened, I would hope it's not just off-screen to where we have no information. That's where it's actually really bad, where it's like, if we see them having a bit of a back and forth, like they're just showing some spells at each other, they're just doing a couple moves, and then it gets down to, Ferris is like, oh, I have to use this trump card ability, I didn't want to have to use it, and then we don't see it, but we know that she wins the fight, and then it's like one of those things where you don't find out until, a good chunk later, when she actually is going to be fighting the main, either Natsu or Igni or whatever, and then you figure out what exactly was that ability. So stuff like that. I don't know. I'm very stoked just to see what they can pull out in general, and what the Erasion sects has that they're going to be able to provide. And I think that that's what's going to be in the next couple of chapters, and that's why we're peering over into, confirmation. The one that we saw the least of, okay, we're going to be going to that one. We got a nice little character display with some content just from Gaia. And I think the whole bit where he's like, his name, Love of the Earth, I think that's going to be a tell into, paying attention to what the other members of the Erasion sects say, and how that ties into all their characters and all their themes, and what is that going to tell us about Ferris as well. But anyway, outside of that, comment below, tell me your thoughts about this chapter. I think that the last 2 chapters should have just been one long chapter, but in the next couple chapters are going to be really what's going to be setting the tone and what we're going to be seeing for the next bit. Like if we spend the next volume or whatever just going around with the Oración Sex and the Oración Seis. But anyway, other than that, comment below. Like I said, I've been trying to finish this. I've been busy, so I gotta get back to it. I've been trying to make sure I can stay on track because I'm tired. But other than that, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about the chapter. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Hopefully, the next one I can get my hair cut. It's been getting in my face. But I'll talk to you guys, like I said, in the next one.